All right. Morning, fellow humans. Um, there's a thing which might be thought to amount to like almost a logical fallacy, right? I call it an appeal to random chance, basically. But it's basically where in a scenario, a person will appeal to an extremely remote hypothetical to make their point or to justify their point. And I don't know to what extent it should be indulged. So you could think of it like this. Um, if I drop a brick on someone's foot, right? In theory, you could argue that that was an accident. Like, I'm sorry, man, I just wasn't paying attention. I wasn't coordinating with you like enough, or I should have been more careful or more attentive to that situation, and consequently, an accident occurred. Right? That's a plausible explanation for that. But if you drop a brick on the guy's foot and then you slap his face and then you call him a pervert and then you steal his girlfriend and burn down his house and drive his car into a lake, if at the end of all of that you're like, I'm sorry, man, it was just an accident, would he accept that? No, of course not. No one would. It's a completely implausible explanation to be like, oh, it was just random chance. Like maybe it just happened, right? It's a scenario in which there is a series of very consistent, very intricate events that all are happening consecutively and tending towards a given conclusion, right? With this guy and his ill or his harm at the epicenter of it, right? That seems to be the goal of this entire series of events. And to say, well, maybe it was just an accident, like, no, you're straining the bounds of what random chance is actually capable of, perhaps there. If random chance is capable of highly intricate, highly consistent results, then I would say almost definitionally it is not random chance anymore. Um, again, you can come across people in these types of scenarios where they'll just use this really obscure hypothetical to justify their point. And I'm not against hypotheticals perhaps in general, as long as they're plausible or conceivable. But if you're just saying maybe blank, maybe this really obscure, really remote possibility, I don't know to what extent that should be indulged as a perspective or as a valid perspective in any case. Anyways, hopefully that made sense. We will be looking at a video from Brett Cooper this week, and we'll see. If I don't get really into the video, I might be able to figure out when the advertisement's going to be. You can have a fun game with this one. All right. Making a literal distance metaphorically, keeping the world with comedy. Give me a second. Shotgun this thing into the. There we go. Um, I see a brand new horizon. Yahtzee. Yeah, video by Brett Cooper. Why women don't want to date red pill man. I always found the red pill movement. Well, I say always. I guess I don't know. Some of it I thought was maybe like initially there's a novelty there that's appealing, but it always felt like the big hat, no cattle sort of guys that were in the red pill movement. Anyways, here we go.
Feminism, toxic masculinity, red pill bros. How on earth are people supposed to find a partner and find love in this?
Here's something. This is something a pattern I've noticed, and I don't know if it's actually just legit or if it's just something that it's kind of random, as we would say. Um, but sometimes you'll see, like, I think it's distinctively a woman thing that when they introduce themselves on streams, they'll do like a two-handed wave thing, and I only see women do it pretty much, and I don't know why exactly, but it seems to be a quirk of theirs.
This insane dating landscape. I've talked
Eh,
about this a lot. We have talked about the Gen Z mental health crisis, which, in my opinion, is just a loneliness epidemic. We are so lonely. We have literally been dubbed the loneliest generation. I know that we're trying to work on that, obviously, but even though that loneliness has been fostered through social media and COVID and all of these things, I think that the dating divide and the idea
Well, it's one of those things where, like, if you don't have to, sometimes you literally just don't. And I think previous generations just had to get out and talk to people, and these generations are like, this generation doesn't necessarily. They have a lot of technology. They have a lot of, like, I can just go online and talk to people in Discord or whatever. And, like, however awesome that is, I think for people, I think it is really important to have like in-person dialogue with individuals, like face to face. Like, it, it's anecdotally, I think there was actually a situation where there was a lot of maybe adopted kids or kids in some sort of orphanage or something like that. And there was a scenario in which a guy would come in every night to turn out the lights, and he would just kind of ruffle this one kid's hair. And somehow, like that little level of contact made like a huge difference in the afterlives of all these kids. Where like the one kid that had that human contact, that had that connection, actually I think ended up doing a lot better. It's kind of interesting. Like, but again, I think I've said this before. I think there are a lot of like unquantifiables involved in human interaction, like on a face-to-face level. There are a lot of things that go on there that like you can't really replicate them in an artificial way, I tend to think, but connection is different, put it that way.
ideological divide has played a huge role. Wendy Walsh, who is a psychology professor at California State University, Channel Islands,
Feminist.
and an ambassador for datingadvice.com, told Newsweek recently that, quote, in the last few years, males have become increasingly conservative, and the most liberal and progressive group in America is young females. The political polarization is already creating problems in the dating scene. People in their 20s are either
Hmm.
not dating at all or
Hmm.
competing for a very small group of people who match their political views. And guys, as I am sure you are well aware by just being young people and humans in this weird
Oh.
culture, I'm sure you are aware that this divide did not happen overnight. And so we need to look back over the political landscape in the
Well,
20
and I think there's an element where you'd see like a pretty significant divide in those who go to college and those who do not as well. And I'm thinking maybe women these days would actually be more likely to be going to college and getting their education there and whatnot, because there's an ideological bent that perhaps goes along with that sometimes, just because a lot of the professors are a certain way and they teach their politics to their students a certain way. So that may be a part of this as well.
21st century to see how we got here and, most importantly, what solutions we can employ to actually fix the situation. But before we do, make sure that you like this episode and subscribe to our channel if you have not already. And of course, ring that notification bell to make sure that you stay
I'll
up to
do it
date on
later.
every single one
Maybe.
of our uploads. And if you want
I'm not subscribing to it now.
updates on all things Brett Cooper,
I mostly only subscribe to like cooking stuff. There are a couple of other things that I subscribe to, but don't judge me. I like good food and I'm not patient enough to wait for other people to make it for me. So
and live events and fun things that we're doing.
also, it was a nice way to learn, or to, for me, this is actually something that would be good for what we were talking about here before. Um, for me, it feels weird and clingy just to ask to hang out with people. So in my world, I try to figure out excuses to be around people, and cooking was an excuse to be around my mother. Taking up golf was an excuse to be around my brothers. So it's a nice way of, hey, you want to do this together, instead of just saying, hey, I want to be around you, I want to talk with you, etc., etc. It's just kind of a nice way of kind of intuitively getting into the space where you can talk with people as an incidental of what you're doing together. And for me, that's a really important tool, perhaps, that people might want to learn for making friends, I guess. Just figure out, instead of like just going straight after the friendship, just figure out something to do with people, and the friendship can come along as an incidental. This has been another episode from your life coach.
Make sure to check out brettcooper.com. Now, back to the show. I think that the easiest place that we can start is
Has she had her kid yet?
with men. And we talk about this all the time. I have been talking about this basically as long as I have been on the internet. And anyone who follows politics even remotely can see the way and understand the way that our culture has alienated men massively over the last
Great
decade to
sister.
25 years or so. And most recently, in my opinion, it has been the Me Too movement and the lasting impacts of that that really unfairly generalized men as predators.
If for whatever reason I couldn't remember the name of Harvey Weinstein. Who's the other pervert? The guy who died in prison. Eh,
Which led to massive, massive reputational damage.
Epstein.
Innocent until proven
Jeffrey
guilty was
Epstein.
basically
Yes.
thrown out in the courts of social media, in the actual courts of law. Like, that has just not been a thing anymore. There was and still is this attack on toxic masculinity, which stereotyped, normal male traits like stoicism or assertiveness as being inherently harmful. And they even went so far as to say that
Well,
things like football.
this is maybe just my relative perspective, but it feels like there was a whole kind of thing where like there were people who instead of like doing the you know respectable thing and just trying to kill men off, they would just ask men to politely die. Like that was kind of the general tone. Just you've had your chance. You can just lie down and die now, and we'll take care of society from now on. We'll take the reins. There's nothing you can really do. Like I, there's an element where you could say, hey, don't lord over the conversation in certain scenarios. But it feels like there's very few good ways of just saying, hey, you have nothing to offer to this situation. So just shut up. I don't like that.
And hunting and just like
Terrible place to
normal
pause.
male hobbies were actually very toxic and were hurting America and were oppressing women. Women would say, F the patriarchy, we want to stamp out the patriarchy. You literally have women who say,
Clearly hysterical. Take them away to be beaten.
I'm a lesbian because I don't need men. I don't want men. I could literally survive
This is
without them.
actually
We don't.
an important thing I think to note though. She was talking about like the beginnings of the Me Too. I don't know, maybe she was. But you're thinking about the beginnings of the Me Too movement with Harvey Weinstein. It wasn't actually a bad sort of thing, but I think this is the nature of every movement that begins. Like once it gets popular, I tend to think the worst sorts of people are the most attracted to power. So once a movement comes into vogue, once it gets popular, you will see the level or the value, the grade of recruits tends to go down because you get a lot of people who aren't there because they really feel a sympathy for the cause and they would be willing to sacrifice for that cause. They're there because they can get something out of being associated with this virtuous and up and coming cause. So it feels like corruption is the inevitable lot of any movement that does get popular, right?
need them as a
Unfortunately.
society. And all of this has been the MO for years now. And therefore, society has
Just get ready. The advertisement's coming here. Well, I'm gonna guess 4 minutes in.
shamed a whole generation of young men into thinking that they are inherently monsters or predators or less than. It has
For the record, I did actually watch this before. It just I forgot where the advertisement was. But I'm gonna see.
turned them inward. It has made so many men insecure and feel like they don't actually have a place in our culture and our society when in reality, you men are so important. I say this all the time. You are the
Oh,
backbone of civilization. You are the backbone of families. We literally cannot exist without you. And yet,
okay.
that
Are you
has not been the
patronizing me?
message that you have been receiving from pundits, from Hollywood, from girls on college campuses, whatever it may be, from podcasters. That is not what you have been hearing. And interestingly, a recent British study revealed that nearly 50% of young men reported feeling that being a man is not a source of pride for them, which is just insane. That is the core
Here's the thing. Like, I hate the notion of self-love, but I think most people. I think it's a good thing to be comfortable with who you are. That's what I like. I hate the notion of like love yourself, be kind to your like. No, just be comfortable with who you are, and certainly take care of yourself. That's a good thing. But I think the idea is that you should want to focus on the well-being of other people. I think that will give you, in the long run, it will give you a much more fulfilling life. If you try to focus on trying to nourish your connections with other people and seek their good as much as your own, perhaps more so. But again, weird pause.
part of your being. That should be something that you love about yourself, that is so integral to who you are, that you should be proud of. And the fact that 50% of young men say that that's not even a thing anymore. And this is what some of the participants had to say. Quote, there are a lot of negative stories about how men have treated women, which makes people assume that all men are the same, which isn't the case, commented one 20-year-old. Another young man said, there is a feeling that men are responsible
I think all women are hysterical. Is that valid?
for patriarchy, and you feel a sense of guilt, although things were this way
Come on.
before I was born, and in spite of personal effort for equality. These men are trying. They have heard, they've tried to respond, and yet they still are made to feel so guilty and so out of place. Another one said social media is damaging to men's mental health as a
Well, there's a point to be made that I feel like since the advent of the online stuff, people are trying to respond to that, which is not necessarily a good thing. And I also think it's not necessarily how people behave in real life. Because you see the feminazi on TikTok saying her spiel on her two hind legs, and you try to respond to that. I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. I don't think that's actually. It's how probably some women think, but it's not, I think, how the majority of sane, right-minded people think. And the same maybe goes for the red pill movement, I hope ish.
society. We have an
I
expectation
guess
of
the point I'm trying to make. I think people in real life are far more reasonable than they are online, if that makes sense. There's a difference in the way they act or in the way they respond.
Another one said social media is damaging to men's mental health as a society. We have an expectation of what a man should be. This puts pressure on men to live up to this expectation. So in trying to
This, all right, I don't know why. I think this is actually the thing I would say. I think people act differently when they're in front of a crowd or they're in front of other people, like online, like making a video about something. They're very aware of the fact that this will be viewed by other people. People act differently in front of a crowd than they do when they're one on one. And that's, I think, where people are the most reasonable. If you get them one on one and they're alone, I think you can. I'm not saying everyone's reasonable, but I think they're far more likely to be reasonable in that sort of scenario.
have heard, they've tried to respond, and yet they still are made to feel so guilty and so out of place. Another one said social media is damaging to men's mental health as a society. We have an expectation
Damaging
of
to
what a
everyone.
man should be. This puts pressure on men to live up to this expectation. So in trying to connect this with current events, it's yeah, no wonder young men moved to the right. No wonder in 2024 young men came out in droves for Donald Trump and JD Vance, who, they might not be perfect men, but they are men who seem to be proud of being men. They are manlier men who have families and seem like the heads of their households. Young men can look up to them and maybe even see themselves in those two men. It's the reason why UFC has absolutely blown up. It's the reason why the male podcasting space is dominating right now, because they are speaking to multiple generations of men who've been ignored for years right now. Millennials, Gen Z, Gen Alpha that is coming up. That is why the male podcasting space is dominating. We'll dive back in, but first, a quick word from our sponsor. Now, unless you're
I
new
feel
here, you know
robbed.
that we have talked a lot about government and media
Hey,
cover-ups like the
that's
Epstein
not
files. We've talked
okay.
about that a lot recently, but that is really the tip of the iceberg, and it's more difficult than ever to know who to trust and where to look,
Do
and
better,
Ground
Brett.
News is one of the most
Do
powerful
better.
tools tackling this every single day. Now, as you guys know, I'm very intentional about who I choose to partner with, so when I talk about Ground News, it is for a reason. Unlike other media platforms, they do not push or suppress information to influence your perception. Their app and website pull in the world's perspective on today's biggest issues so that you see what facts are being covered, ignored, and what biases are influencing both. And probably the clearest example of this is their blind spot feed that shows you exactly what stories the media and your algorithms might be suppressing in order to make sure that you truly stay
IMF.
informed. Now, I partner with Ground News to
Xi
give you full
Jinping.
access to the
Xi
truth for
Jinping.
40% off.
Xi
That is $5 a
Jinping.
month for the same Vantage plan that I have been using when you go to groundnews.com/Brett
Jinping.
or
All right.
scan the QR code on the screen. This is how we hold the media accountable. So go join today.
From food-grade lubricants to LED lighting and every product in.
And it makes sense that a lot of this just so happens to be on the right because, I mean, who are they going to look up to on the left? Like Tim Walz with his jazz hands? Pete Buttigieg on his little
Jazz
bicycle
hands
with
are
his
bass.
husband? No, no, those are not the role models that these young men are craving. after decades of being told that they are less than, that they should be ashamed and feel guilty for their natural feelings, their natural inclinations as
Well,
biological.
I think this is where you see the red pill rising. The more it feels like the more you suppress an idea, the more you piss people off, the more any and all responses to that suppression become kind of acceptable in people's minds, and they're less likely to self-regulate, that sort of thing. They're less likely to call out, well, at least he's against these guys, right? At least he's against the bad guys in this scenario. So it breeds that type of divisiveness when you're like saying no, you're like, yeah. When it comes from one side, it feels like it's going to come from the other side. It just feels like the way things tend to work.
Men. And unfortunately, when a whole society, when a whole political party turns against and villainizes one sex, you are not just going to move to healthy role models and find some common middle
Yeah,
ground. It's not
people are the most moderate creatures. Now, like again, like she's saying, you get this reaction, right? The reaction seems to be extreme in scenarios where the initial causality is extreme.
going to work like that. You are going to see the consequences of young men who fell through the cracks, who were left behind, who were villainized to no end, who were made to feel guilty. They are going to have to go somewhere. And often they're going to lash out, which leads us to the creation of the red pill man, which is a hot topic in
Yes.
2025. Whenever anybody brings up the red pill bros, if you talk about them, if you tweet at them, I feel like they're going to end up in this comment section. They're going to like pop out to like talk about their values,
All
whatever.
right, give me a
But the
second.
red pill
The
man
dog's
is
barking
playing
and
his
it's
own
annoying
role
me.
in this very complicated and convoluted dating landscape. And these men, in my opinion, view modern feminism as a societal evil whose express goal is to oppress men. They believe that women hold unfair power in today's culture, which is
Hmm.
definitely true in our modern culture, and I agree with them
Well,
on feminism.
I think there's an element to that is true. That for a long time it was kind of believe all women, and they were given the benefit of the doubt. And I think this is still true. I think especially in scenarios where domestic abuse is involved, women are, and perhaps I'm not saying this is bad actually, that women do receive the benefit of the doubt because they're in a very different position generally physically than their male counterparts. Right? Generally, the guy is stronger. He's more more robust just in a lot of ways than women, and consequently, we tend to want to protect women more so. But in the same way, actually, it feels like when men actually are in trouble, there's a lot less channels for them to go through to get help. Because women are the ones who are more often seen as being the victims of this sort of thing, which is, yeah, there's statistics on that which actually would tend to indicate there's a lot. It's quite often more like a bilateral thing. That's maybe not the right word. It goes both ways, like it's a mutual abuse of each other. Where's I going with this? Because women are more often kind of the like seen as the victims of that, or the ones who actually ask for help in that scenario. There's a lot more channels set up for them to actually to get help.
I agree that modern
Love
feminism
it.
has gone too far. It's shifted from being about equality and uplifting women to actually dominating men. Like they vocalize that. They do not hide that. That is something that they are proud of. They speak about. So these men are not wrong when it comes to any of those things, but they don't just stop with fighting that. They don't just stop by saying, hey, this is wrong. We disagree with that. Instead, they in turn idolize these hyper dominant quote unquote alpha traits. They have a perverted view of masculinity and femininity and a woman's role in society. They also very often lump women
Women belong in the kitchen. I'm just kidding. It's like we wouldn't trust anything as important as food. Now, I thought about this. It would be like a great bit for like reverse, like like for a sketch or something, for like some sort of reverse. What's the word? Come on, misogyny. Someone's like, no, we would never trust women with anything as important as food, because you do actually realize historically there was a time when all the chefs were basically men. It wasn't until like I don't know when actually. I think it's sometime in the Middle Ages, maybe, when they actually started letting women, cook. But up to that point, it was all men in the kitchen. It was a very manly thing, which is why I took it up.
But these days it's seen as more of a woman's job, kind of a homemaker, kind of part and parcel with that, doing the dishes, doing laundry, and cooking.
Together and see us all as being inherently manipulative, interested only in exploiting men for their resources and their money and their status. And possibly the thing that turns me off the most is that they often assert that their manhood is something that is defined by how many women they can exploit, how many
Mm,
women they can sleep with, how many women they can impregnate, how far they can sow their seeds, and how many children they can have, how
no, it's like a manho, a mo, if you will.
and ill-fitting their suits can be, how nice their cars are, like how many cigars they can smoke. It is a caricature of masculinity. It is bitter, and in
Mm,
my opinion, it is incredibly performative. And while I know that I just spent 2 minutes basically complaining about them and saying what I think is
yay!
wrong with their ideology, their core grievances, like the reason why the red pill bro was created in the first place,
Mm,
like their core grievances are often very legitimate. Like, liberal women and progressives, you created a space for the red pill man to thrive. You pushed men for years,
mm-hmm.
for decades, so far into a corner that they had no choice
Say
but
it
to
again.
turn to people like Andrew Tate to create these ideologies so that they could feel powerful, so that they could have somebody who would say, hey,
Yeah, you know, let's watch a little bit more. See if we can find a more convenient stopping place. I'll cut that part out.
it's pretty great to be a man, even if that
It is great to be a man. Well, and this is the thing I think about manhood. It feels like it is and should be a very open-ended sort of thing, like that. Virtually, like everything that you want to do, by dint of being a thing that you want to do as a man, is technically male behavior. It's like categorically male behavior. It might not be stereotypical male behavior, but it is male behavior because you want to do it and you're a man, right? So I feel like there should be a lot of a very loose interpretation of what manhood means within the realm of what is healthy and what is, productive. There should be a very like loose interpretation of like, yeah, this is what manhood is, right? And it should be open to a lot of different types of things. I tend to think.
version of a man is kind of performative and a caricature, in my opinion. And I'm sorry, but the result of all of that, what this has become, is a major turnoff for women. Even women who might share your values or
Hmm.
politically agree with you. Because, like you, didn't want to date a feminist woman who hated you for your manhood and just hated your basic identity and wanted to take advantage of you through
Hmm.
sex. Women also are not going to want to date men who are
I am picking the worst place to pause, but it does feel like there's this. I think respect is kind of the building blocks of relationships, and the recognition that there is value to be had in the other person's perspective, that they do have value on some level, or something like that. I think that is kind of the basis for most relationships. And if you don't have that, if one of you is thinking the other person is worthless on some level, or you act like the other person is worthless, or their opinion is worthless, it's not really the basis for something meaningful in my mind. You're just like, yeah, yeah, let's bang. Like, yeah, I don't know. I can't see how that would really go any place. Super good.
assholes and hate them for just being women. And I really think that a lot of these men online that we see just generally don't like women. Like, I read their posts, I'm like, have you ever like been friends with a woman? Like, have you ever had any like moment
And again, that's the thing. Like, if your entire exposure to women is online women, I could see how you develop some very interesting ideas about like what they are and what they're capable of and what they tend towards as far as character and morality.
of enjoyment with like a female, a person of the opposite sex? Because based on what you're saying, it seems like you just don't like us. And so it is no surprise to me that this is a situation that is occurring more and more frequently in our modern dating culture. This is from the New York Post, a recent
I was gonna say I like girls, but that sounds weird. I don't know. I appreciate women on some level. I just think, never mind. I'll stop. There's no way that was gonna end. Well,
article from a couple months ago. According to 19-year-old Liza, who's dating someone in his 20s and sat down with the outlet, she said, "I'd go on the odd date with someone my age, and more often than not, it would end up in a straight-up argument when he started saying that Andrew Tate makes good points. Her boyfriend now, this older guy, is, quote, super chill, a feminist, and weirdly, so are most of his mates. He missed all of the manosphere stuff, and it shows." So now, unfortunately, because of all this red pill bro
well, I think that's an oversimplification that like the manosphere is bad because I think there's a lot of guys in there um do some pretty good stuff without going like over the top with the whole like stereotypical traits maybe.
stuff, women are being pushed even further into the opposite direction, into the welcoming arms of these older, chill feminist bros with their chill, older feminist bro mates. But of course, because we need to be fair, the women in this
Chill in this scenario means stoner. I'm pretty sure that's what it means in the Oxford Dictionary. Chill, probably on marijuana.
scenario are also not blameless.
You could complete tangent. Do you guys ever hear that? Like, I was hearing some like, oh goodness, advertisements the other day for like mushrooms or something like that, and it feels like there is a weird type of like timbre to like stoner voice or something like that. I don't know what it is exactly, but they just have like a weird kind of way they talk. I don't know why exactly. It's just
Literally at all. Like they might have started this whole thing from the get-go. And in talking about this, my mind immediately goes to Alex Cooper and her podcast, Call Her Daddy. But before we keep going, I want to thank today's sponsor. Now,
again,
if you followed me for the past
I
few
feel
years, you
robbed.
know that there is a product that I have loved for a
No,
long time, and that would be let's use this after long work day, just after giving birth. And so if
if you're
you are
not gonna
looking
do
for
it
a way
funny,
to deeper to save
make
15%
the cool
off your
transition.
order, again, that is bondcharge.com/Cooper, and you will
Can't make me
automatically
listen.
get 15%
Also,
off
I already
at
listened to one
checkout.
of her
Grand
ads,
Canyon University is a private Christian
but
university
you
in the
can go check
beautiful
that out if
Phoenix,
you like.
Arizona, and they believe that the American dream starts with a purpose, and they are here to help you find yours. GCU to help you achieve your unique private. It's Christian, like a man that they should visit
Must have been the win.
gcu.edu to learn more today. Now, back to Alex Cooper. She and her original co-host would often tell women that they needed to have a roster of men lining up waiting for them to date, that they should, quote unquote, have sex like a man, that they should toy and play games with men as a way of gaining power and confidence. Like, this is literally
Again, there's like if you look online and your only exposure to women is online, if you don't actually associate with women in your real life, it's very easy to see why guys get some of these ideas. Anyways, we'll leave that where it is. Yeah, Why Women Don't Want to Date Red Pill Men by Brett Cooper, episode 16. Now, for the love, I need to wash my mind out with soap. Uh, sorry. Oh, I was just thinking it's kind of a unfortunate numerical discrepancy. I'm not proud of knowing that. All right, moving on. Salem witch trials, which is also a weird discrepancy. Believe it or not, I did not plan this. But that's what we're looking at today. Historical abnormalities. Lightning. All right. For other uses, see Salem witch trials. Disambiguation. All right, I'm gonna go grab some water actually. Uh, the Salem witch trials were a series of hearings and prosecutions of people accused of witchcraft in colonial Massachusetts between February. You know, I don't even know if this is actually a little known secret, but there weren't like witch at that point was not it was gender ambiguous. So there was both men and women who were accused of being witches. I think at one point was like some dude had said something kind of super innocuous, maybe in defense of one of the witches, and they literally just said like that's what a witch would say or something, and they ended up like condemning him, I think, too. All right, prosecutions of people accused of witchcraft in colonial Massachusetts between February 1692 and May 1693. More than 200 people were accused, 30 people were found guilty, 19 of whom were executed. Huh. Somehow, just like through all the kerfuffle, it would have felt like more people would have been, done to death. All right. 19 of whom were executed by hanging, 14 women, 5 men. One other man, Giles Corey died under torture after refusing to enter a plea. At least 5 people died in disease-ridden jails without trial. Although the accusations began in Salem Village, known today as Danvers, that's probably a reason they wanted to change the name, maybe. I actually don't know why they. Huh. A town in Essex County, Massachusetts, located at Danvers River, short from Boston. I actually looked that one up. Originally known as Salem Village, the town is most widely known for its association with the Salem witch trials. I bet you that actually be a killer like tourist business if you wanted to do that sort of thing. Right, where were we? There. Accusations and arrests were made in numerous towns beyond the village, notably in Andover and Topsfield. The residency of many of the accused is now unknown. Around 151 people, nearly half that were accused and were able to be traced back to the 25 different New England communities. The grand juries and trials for this capital crime were conducted by Court of Oyer and Terminer in 1792 by a superior court of judicature in 1693. Both held in Salem Town, the regional center for Salem Village, where the hangings took place. It was the deadliest witch hunt in the history of colonial North America. 14 other women and 2 men were executed in Massachusetts and Connecticut during the 17th century. The Salem witch trials only came to an end when serious doubts began to arise among the leading clergymen. Hey, go Christianity, yeah! About the validity of the spectral evidence that had been used to justify so many of the convictions, and due to the sheer number of those accused, including several prominent citizens of the colony. In the years after the trials, several of the accusers, mostly teenage girls, admitted that they found newspapers. Who could have predicted that? I'm just saying, like a pretty girl like wants to get rid of some ugly girl wants to get rid of some pretty girl. I feel like that would be one way you could facilitate that. Had fabricated their charges. In 1702, the General Court of Massachusetts declared the trials unlawful, and in 1711, the colonial legislature annulled the convictions, passing a bill mentioning 22 individuals by name and reversing their attainers. All right, what does attainer mean? A stain or corruption of blood, which arose from being condemned for a serious capital crime. All right, nice. The episode is one of colonial America's most notorious cases of mass hysteria. I think we could maybe rival that with some stuff that went on these days. It was not unique, but a colonial manifestation of a much broader phenomenon of witch trials in early modern period, which took the lives of tens of thousands. In Europe and America, Salem's events have been used in political rhetoric and popular literature as a vivid cautionary tale about the dangers of isolation, religious extremism, false accusation, and lapses in due procedure. Many historians consider the lasting effects of the trials to have been highly influential in the history of the United States, according to the historian George Lincoln Burr. The Salem witchcraft was the rock on which New England theocracy shattered. Interesting. But again, it feels like the clergy were the ones who ended it, so it's like, okay, I don't know if enlightened secular thinkers were really the cause of that happening, or if they could lay claim to that. At the 300th anniversary events held in 1992 to commemorate the victims of the trial, a park was dedicated in Salem and a memorial in Danvers. In 1957, an act passed by the Massachusetts legislature absolved 6 people, while another one passed in 2001 absolved 5 other victims. As of 2004, we still talk about exonerating or pardoning the victims in 2022, the last convicted Salem witch, Elizabeth Johnson Jr., was officially exonerated 329 years after she'd been found guilty. Didn't do her much good, but still interesting. University of Virginia. No, let's switch to this a little bit. While witch trials have been in much of Europe, by mid-17th century, they continued on the fringes of Europe and the American colonies. The events in 1692 to 1693 in Salem became a brief outburst of a sort of hysteria in the New World, while the practices was already waning in most of Europe. In 1668, against modern Sadducism, Joseph Glanville claimed that he could prove the existence of witches and ghosts and of the supernatural realm. Glanville wrote about the denial of bodily resurrection and supernatural spirits. In his treatise, Glanville claimed that ingenious men should believe in witches and apparitions if they doubted the reality of spirits. That ingenious? I don't know. Ingenious probably. Men should believe. I don't know if that's typo or what. That doesn't really make sense in that sentence. If they doubted the reality of spirits, not only denied demons also, but they not only denied demons, but also the Almighty God. Glanville wanted to prove that the supernatural could not be denied, and those who did deny apparitions were considered heretics, for it also disproved their belief in angels. Works by men such as Glanville and Cotton Mather tried to prove that demons were alive. Accusations. The trials began after a few local women in Salem were accused of witchcraft by four young girls, Betty Paris, Abigail Williams, and Putnam Jr., Elizabeth Hubbard. Accusations were centered around the concept of affliction. And that's perhaps another thing. You get the idea that this was like an act of the patriarchy. No, it seems like it was literally women accusing other women. Can't imagine women being catty and rivals of each other. And the women accused of having caused physical and mental harm to the girls through witchcraft. Oh, no doubt they were coerced by men. The recorded witchcraft executions in New England. The earliest recorded witchcraft execution was that of Elsa in Hartford, Connecticut. The start of Connecticut witch trials, which lasted until 1663. Historian Clarence F. Jewett included a list of other people executed in the New England in his 1881 book. New England had been settled by religious dissenters seeking to build a Bible-based society according to their own chosen discipline. The original 1629 Royal Charter of the Massachusetts Bay Colony was vacated in 1684, after which King James installed Sir Edmund Andros as the governor of the Dominion of New England. Andros was ousted in 1689 after the Glorious Revolution in England replaced the Catholic James II with Protestant co-ruling William and Mary. Simon Bradstreet and Thomas Danforth, the colony's last leaders under an odd charter, resumed their posts as governor and deputy governor, but lacked the constitutional authority to rule because the old charter had been vacated. At the same time, the tensions erupted between English colonists and French-supported Wabanaki people of that territory, which came to be known as King William's War. This was 13 years after the devastating King Philip's War with the, oh goodness, that word, and other indigenous tribes in the south and southern and western New England. In October 1690, Sir William Phipp led an unsuccessful attack on the French-held Quebec. Between 1689 and 1692, Native Americans continuously attacked many English settlements along the Maine coast, leading to the abandonment of some settlements, resulting in the flood of refugees into areas like Essex County. Let's get a little bit closer here. Local context was known for its fractious population, which not only suffered from many internal disputes, but also from a strained relationship with Salem town, present-day Salem. Arguments about property lines, grazing rights, and church privileges were rife, and neighbors considered the population to be quarrelsome. In 1672, the villages voted to hire the ministers of their own apart from Salem town. The first two ministers, James Bailey, served from 1673 to 1679, and George Burroughs served from 1680 to 1683, stayed only a few years each, departing after the congregation failed to pay their full rate. Paid pastors, not something I'm super familiar with. Burroughs was subsequently arrested at the height of witchcraft hysteria, which was hanging as a witch in August 96. Burroughs was subsequently arrested at the height of the witchcraft hysteria and was hanged as a witch. So the minister, that's a little bit ironic, was hanged as a witch in August 1692, despite the minister's rights being upheld by the general court and the parish being admonished. Each of the two ministers still chose to leave. The third minister, Deodat Lawson, I don't know what that is. Hearing a lot of new names here. Who served from 1684 to 1688, stayed for a short time, leaving after the Church of Salem refused to ordain him rather than over issues with the congregation. The parish disagreement about Salem village's choice of Samuel Parris as its first ordained minister. On June 18th, 1689, the villagers agreed to hire Parris for £66 annually, I guess. 1/3 part in money, and the other two-thirds parts in provisions and use of the parsonage. They raised parishes on October 10th, 1689. However, they raised Paris benefits, voting to grant him the deed to the parsonage and 2 acres of land. This conflicted with the 1681 village resolution that had stated that it shall not be lawful for the inhabitants of this village to convey the houses or lands or any other concerns belonging to the ministry to any particular persons or persons, not for any cause, by vote or other ways. That seems like a law of the Medes and Persians sort of thing. It's not necessarily a good idea, but gender, we're women about 78%. Anyways, we'll be done with that. All right. Gaming. Yeah. My mouth gets a little bit arbitrary. Oh, ow. I shouldn't say ow. It's actually kind of nice to have your back cracked a little bit like that. Yeah, I thought there was some sort of DLC to this that would actually have involved like fishing or something. I don't think there is. No, if I remember correctly, there was a bit of a thingy following this guy. Huh? Holy shoot! Actually, a pretty large area, all things told. Pretty large, yeah. All right, all right. Can you drop a pin? Huh? Actually, have all the people. Nice. Hmm. All right, pin. Oh, there we go. Hmm. Hmm. Stradivarius. 270 Stradivarius. All right. Now, let's see if we can go find that poor lost soul. Oh, out. Mm, mm. Mm. I think the wind's going the other way, so for golden. Let's see. We can get a moose here. Moose. Huh. I wonder if you're supposed to have a bigger gun for moose.
You know, I spotted some tracks earlier, close to where you're at right now. I'll send the coordinates.
Hmm. White-tailed jackrabbit. I didn't know there was a thing in here. Come on, man. The moose. Where could it be hiding?
Then what would the purpose of the blue lights are? Oh, hold on. There's a bear. All right. Assuming this is big enough for a bear. Gosh. That's the moose. There we go. Hold still, you wretch. Is there a bull moose somewhere? There we go. Hello. Still. Shh. Come on, boyo. There you go. Now, come on. There we go. More blood. Blood. Hey! Why are you not bleeding faster?
to me this way. Something. I don't know if I got this one. Come on. Catch up to this stupid bastard. There he is, I think. That is not the one I shot. Oh, jackrabbits. Got one! I should probably find the last kill before I start shooting other stuff. feel so proud right now. Hmm. All right, back. I don't know if I'm gonna get that moose anyways. Seemed like it wasn't slowing down at all or anything. So. There we go. Let's see if I can find this persona non grata. I think that's the right term. No, for the love. Hmm. I might be able to, if I go across this peninsula here. But this isn't streaming. Dang it all. You guys have been watching me doing stupid stuff for the last long. Alright. Like on that disappointing note, we're gonna end it. I have to figure this out. This is stupid. This thing won't, like, somehow this game in particular will not go onto the thing. And maybe, okay, maybe let me check here. It might just be that I forgot to. I did put on the game catcher. Dang it all to heck. Let's try this again and see if it actually goes on. And the stupid thing about this game in particular is that you can't just like pop out of it and pop back into it. I don't think anyways. It's weird that way. Oh, there we go. Yeah, see now it works. Stupid. I think that will just be all for today though. Alright. Thanks for watching. If you like the video, please press the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment if you want to.